The laugh cut through the boardroom before he even finished reading my slide. Sharp and dismissive, like I had just suggested we power the office with hamster wheels. My CEO leaned back in his leather chair and shook his head slowly. The presentation was still glowing on the screen behind me, graphs and projections I had spent 3 months perfecting. "Let's be real here," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "This isn't realistic." Someone near the back snorted. I felt my face burn hot. My fingers tightened around the remote control until my knuckles turned white. I was still standing at the front of the room like an idiot, frozen while everyone watched. No one said anything. No one looked at me. They just stared at their laptops or their coffee cups, waiting for this awkward moment to pass. I wanted to disappear into the floor. He didn't stop there. He never did. "This company can't afford fantasy projects," he continued, gesturing vaguely at my charts like they were children's drawings. His eyes swept across the executives, and a few of them nodded along like bobbleheads. I felt something crack inside my chest. Not my confidence, not yet, but something close to it. My throat felt tight. I tried to swallow but couldn't. The room was silent except for the hum of the projector. I had practiced this presentation 17 times. I knew every number, every projection, every backup plan. But none of that mattered now. He had decided before I even opened my mouth. I could see it in his face, in the way he had barely glanced at the screen. This wasn't about my work. This was about control. I nodded once. Not because I agreed with him. Not because I accepted his judgment. But because my body understood something my brain was still catching up to. This was not feedback. This was erasure. He was not critiquing my strategy. He was dismissing my existence in this space. I clicked off the presentation, my hands shaking slightly, and sat down in the back row. The meeting continued without me. He moved on to budget reviews like nothing had happened. Like he had not just humiliated me in front of 12 people who could influence my career. I stared at my notebook, seeing nothing. My handwriting blurred. I had believed that good work spoke for itself. I had believed that competence was a shield. I was wrong. My name is Elena Wright. I am 29 years old, and I work as a senior strategist at a tech consulting firm in Austin. Or I did, anyway, before everything changed. I have always been the quiet one. The person who stays late, fixes problems no one else notices, and documents everything in neat spreadsheets. I believed results mattered more than politics. I thought my work would eventually be seen. For 3 years, I built models, pitched ideas, and watched other people take credit. I told myself it was fine. I told myself my time would come. That day in the boardroom, staring at the back of his head while he laughed at my life's work, I realized I had been lying to myself. Competence was not enough. Silence was not strategy. It was surrender. 6 months before that meeting, he had stopped by my desk holding a coffee. He was scanning a printed copy of my proposal, the one about restructuring our client acquisition model. "This is sharp," he said without looking up. "Send me the full version with the financial projections." I remember pausing, just for a second, my cursor hovering over the attachment button. Something in my gut told me to hesitate. But I ignored it. I wanted him to see what I could do. I wanted validation. So I attached the 40-page document I had been building for 8 months and hit send. He smiled, tapped my desk twice like I was a good dog, and walked away. I felt proud. Excited, even. I actually thought this was my breakthrough moment. That proposal was not just an idea. It was my ladder. If it worked, I would finally move into a leadership role. If it failed publicly, I would lose credibility, momentum, and any shot at advancement. I had bet everything on it. Every late night, every skipped weekend, every moment I chose spreadsheets over sleep. The model was airtight. I had tested it against 5 years of historical data, run worst-case scenarios, and built contingency plans for every variable. It was not a fantasy. It was a blueprint. But blueprints only matter if the person holding them gets credit. And he had just taken the keys. 3 days later, I was walking past the executive corridor when I heard his voice. He was talking to the VP of operations near the elevators. "Vision like that is rare," he said, his tone warm and approving. I slowed down, pretending to check my phone. She smiled, thanking him for something. I had sat in the same presentation where she pitched her quarterly goals. Her slides had been generic. Bullet points with no data. Buzzwords stacked on top of more buzzwords. But he had praised her like she had just solved world hunger. Meanwhile, my fully developed model sat in his inbox, probably forwarded to someone else by now. I kept walking, jaw clenched, eyes stinging. I did not cry. I just swallowed it down like I always did. I stopped complaining. I stopped expecting fairness. Instead, I worked harder, refining the model even though no one had asked for updates. I added new projections, stress-tested the numbers, and created a presentation deck so detailed it could stand on its own. Part of me still believed the truth would surface. That someone would notice the discrepancy. That he would be forced to acknowledge where the work came from. I stayed late most nights, the office dark except for my desk lamp. I told myself I was being strategic. But really, I was just scared. Scared that if I stopped moving, I would have to admit I was stuck. That I had handed my best work to someone who saw me as disposable. 2 weeks after the boardroom humiliation, I received an email by accident. It was a forwarded chain, and my name was not in the recipient list. But someone had hit reply all without realizing it. The subject line read, "Client Acquisition Framework External Review." I opened it, heart pounding. My work was attached. The exact document I had sent him. 40 pages of strategy, projections, and models. But the sender was not me. It was him. And the email made it sound like he had created it. One of the external consultants replied with a question, "Can you confirm who built this framework? The modeling approach is unusual." I scrolled down, hands trembling. His response was one sentence, "This was developed internally by our executive team." He did not mention my name. Not once. I stared at the screen for a long time, my chest tight. I could reply. I could correct the record. I could forward the original email trail proving I had sent him the document months ago. But I did not. Instead, I closed the email and returned to my spreadsheet. Because in that moment, I understood something. If I fought this publicly, I would lose. He had power, relationships, and a title. I had a paper trail and a lot of anger. Fighting him directly would make me look bitter, emotional, unstable. So I made a different choice. I decided to make myself indispensable. If he was going to steal my ideas, I would make sure they could not function without me. The next executive review meeting happened 3 weeks later. He was presenting the client acquisition strategy to the board, using my slides. He spoke confidently, walking them through the numbers like he had built every formula himself. Then someone asked a technical question. "How did you account for seasonal variance in the third quarter projections?" He paused. Just for a second. But I saw it. His eyes flicked toward me. "That's a great question," he said smoothly. "Elena, you worked on the modeling. Can you clarify?" The room turned to look at me. I kept my face neutral. The variance was adjusted using a rolling 3-month average weighted by client size, I said calmly. "It's detailed in Appendix C." The board member nodded, satisfied. He smiled like he had planned that all along. But the crack was there now. Visible. That evening, my calendar updated. A new meeting appeared, Investor Deep Dive Strategy Review. The attendees list had my name at the top. His name was not there. I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. Not from fear. From something else. Clarity. The investors did not want the presenter. They wanted the person who actually understood the work. They had noticed the pause. They had seen him stumble. And now they wanted to talk to me. I closed my laptop and sat in the dark office, feeling something unfamiliar rising in my chest. It was not hope. It was certainty. I had spent 3 years being invisible. That was about to change. The investor meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 10 in the morning. I prepared like my life depended on it. Because it did. I rebuilt the entire presentation from scratch, adding details he did not even know existed. I included the version history of every model, showing exactly when each iteration was created. I documented my research sources, the datasets I had used, and the assumptions behind every projection. I was not just preparing to present. I was preparing to prove. By Monday night, I had a presentation so airtight that no one could question its origin. I practiced it 12 times in my apartment, speaking to my empty living room like it was full of investors. My voice did not shake anymore. Tuesday morning, I walked into the conference room at 9:55. 3 investors were already seated. I recognized 2 of them from previous earnings calls. They looked up when I entered, and one of them smiled. "Elena, right?" he asked. "Yes," I said, setting down my laptop. "Thank you for making time. We've been looking forward to this," he replied. He was not there. No one mentioned him. No one asked where he was. They wanted to talk to me. I opened my presentation, took a breath, and started speaking. The words came easily, because this time, I was not presenting someone else's vision. I was presenting my own. And every single person in that room knew it. The investors did not interrupt me. They leaned forward. They took notes. They asked precise, technical questions, the kind only the person who built the model could answer. "How did you validate the customer retention assumptions?" one of them asked. I pulled up a spreadsheet showing 3 years of retention data, segmented by industry and contract size. I cross-referenced our historical data with industry benchmarks from Gartner and Forrester, I explained. The retention curve stabilizes after 18 months, which is why I weighted the projections accordingly. He nodded slowly, clearly impressed. Another investor asked about scaling challenges. I walked them through the operational constraints, the hiring timeline, and the technology infrastructure required. Every answer was backed by data. Every number had a source. By the end of the hour, the room felt different. Respectful. Engaged. One of the investors closed his notebook and looked at me directly. "We'd like to continue this conversation," he said. "Directly with you." After that meeting, everything shifted. He started avoiding eye contact. When I walked into the break room, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Meetings that used to include me were suddenly rescheduled without explanation. I was not upset. I was relieved. Because his discomfort meant he understood. The power had moved. He could not present my work anymore without me in the room to answer the hard questions. And the investors had made it clear they trusted me, not him. I kept my head down and continued working. But now, I was working on my terms. I started documenting everything. Every email, every meeting note, every piece of feedback. I was building a case, not for revenge, but for leverage. 2 weeks later, he tried again. He presented a new strategic initiative in a company-wide meeting, speaking confidently about innovation and growth. But his words felt hollow. Borrowed. He used phrases I had written, concepts I had developed, but he could not explain them deeply. When someone asked a follow-up question, he stumbled. "I'll have the team pull those details together," he said vaguely. No one looked convinced. Ownership does not stick when it is stolen. People can sense the difference between someone who built something and someone who is just repeating talking points. He had always been good at performing. But performance has limits. And his were showing. The next investor call happened a week later. I was not originally invited, but one of the investors requested my presence directly. He had no choice but to add me. During the call, he was presenting quarterly results when an investor interrupted him. "Can Elena clarify the assumptions behind the growth projections?" He froze. Just for a moment. Then he smiled tightly. "Of course," he said, his voice strained. "Elena." I unmuted myself and walked them through the model, explaining the variables, the data sources, and the sensitivity analysis. I spoke for 4 minutes. When I finished, the investor thanked me specifically. "That's exactly what we needed to hear," he said. He said nothing. The silence on his end was loud. The following Monday, leadership announced a restructuring. It was phrased carefully. Professional. polite. He was being transitioned into an advisory role, effective immediately. No drama. No scandal. Just a quiet removal. His authority dissolved without anyone saying his name aloud. The email went out at 9 in the morning. By noon, people were already acting like he had never been in charge. I did not celebrate. I did not gloat. I just kept working. Because I had learned something important. The best revenge is not confrontation. It is becoming undeniable. A week after his departure, I received an email from a venture capital firm. They had been one of the investor groups in the deep dive meetings. We're exploring a partnership opportunity, the email read. We'd like to discuss a potential leadership role with direct equity and investor access. I read it 3 times, my heart pounding. This was not a promotion within the same broken system. This was an exit. A clean one. They wanted me to build something new. Something mine. I replied that afternoon, scheduling a call for the following week. I did not tell anyone at the company. Not yet. The call went better than I expected. They wanted me to lead a new consulting division focused on growth strategy. I would have full autonomy, a team of my choosing, and a seat at the table with investors. We've been watching your work, the managing partner said. You're the kind of strategist we build companies around. I accepted the offer 2 days later. My resignation letter was short. Professional. Grateful for the opportunity. No bitterness. No blame. Just a polite exit. I submitted it on a Wednesday morning and walked out the same day. I did not wait for a counteroffer. I did not need closure. Because I had already moved on. Packing my desk was quiet. I had 3 boxes. Most of my work lived in the cloud anyway. A few people stopped by to say goodbye. The VP of operations, surprisingly, was one of them. I always knew you were the one doing the real work, she said quietly. I looked at her, surprised. Then why didn't you say anything? She hesitated. Because I was scared. And that's on me. I nodded. I did not absolve her. But I understood. Fear makes people complicit. It had almost made me complicit too. I carried my boxes to my car, took one last look at the building, and drove away. I did not cry. I did not feel sad. I felt free. He never contacted me. Not to apologize. Not to wish me well. Not even to ask where I was going. And I was glad. Because his silence confirmed everything. He had never seen me as a person. Just as a resource. Someone whose ideas he could borrow and whose presence he could ignore. But I did not need his acknowledgement anymore. I had something better. I had proof. Proof that my work stood on its own. Proof that the right people would recognize it. Proof that I did not need permission to be valuable. 6 months into my new role, I was leading a team of 8 strategists, working directly with founders and investors on growth models. My work was cited in industry publications. I was invited to speak at conferences. People knew my name now. Not because I had fought for it. But because I had built something undeniable. One afternoon, I received a LinkedIn message from someone at my old company. We miss your insights, it read. Would you be open to consulting? I stared at the message for a long time. Then I declined. Politely. Firmly. Because going backward was not an option. I had spent too long waiting for someone else to see my worth. I was done waiting. Looking back, I realized that the boardroom laugh was not the worst thing that happened to me. It was the best. Because it forced me to stop hoping someone else would validate me. It pushed me to prove my value in a way that could not be ignored or stolen. He thought he was shutting me down. But he was actually setting me free. I learned that competence without boundaries is just free labor. That silence is not humility. It is self-erasure. And that the most powerful thing you can do is walk away from people who refuse to see you. Not in anger. Not in bitterness. But in certainty. Because knowing your worth does not require anyone's permission. And the best revenge is not proving someone wrong. It is building something so undeniable that their opinion stops mattering. I did not need him to apologize. I just needed to stop waiting for him to.